Hello, everybody. Welcome into Sports by GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today is Tuesday, November 5th. We have a big show for you, a big day in sports, especially around the NFL. Week 9 officially wrapped up last night. We'll go over our winners and losers from it, including a crazy Monday Night Football. We have our power rankings, as always, 32-1 coming up later. And of course, the NFL trade deadline has come and gone as of just an hour ago. The teams are all but set now. We take a look at some of the biggest moves that happened all day today and over the course of the entirety of the football season. But before we get into any of that, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you are on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Tuesday, November 5th. But like I was saying, we're going to start off our show today with the biggest story in the NFL, the NFL trade deadline. Throughout the course of the NFL season so far, and up until the deadline an hour ago, there have been 18 trades taking place. Some of them have been big. We talked about a lot of those wide receiver ones that took place earlier on in the season. Some of them a little bit smaller, but a couple of big ones that took place today. Starting off with the biggest one, arguably, where Marshawn Lattimore, someone who'd been in trade talks for a while, finally moved to Washington. A big move. Washington, obviously a team that is on the rise. They have their best record in years. Jaden Daniels, still a rookie, looks like he's on path to have an amazing career down there in the capital. This is going to be This is a huge move for them. Again, they are a team that has one of the worst secondaries in the entire league. Getting a 4-time All-Pro player in Marshawn Lattimore to go and shore up the corner. While that defense has been playing better than it was in the beginning of the season, they've kind of sacrificed a little bit of their identity in the run game in order to protect the pass. They've gone more into quarters looks, some more coverage downs, leaving the box a little more empty, and teams have been running up and down on them. This should help them. They finally have a shutdown corner with a little bit of leverage, a little bit of time left on his contract. This is a big move for the Commanders, and it's their first real big splash as contenders as we take a look at them. The other big move that took place today has to do with the Packers. They trade Preston Smith. Not really a team that I had marked as a team that was going to trade players. Preston Smith traded to the Pittsburgh Steelers. He's having a bit of a down season, but when he's on, him and Zadarius Smith, who also got traded today to Detroit, both of them can be elite pass rushers. Detroit, obviously a team that had kept their eyes on a pass rusher all season long since they lost Aiden Hutchinson. They go out and they get Zadarius Smith for cheap, a guy who from the Browns was pretty obviously on the trade market. You'd think they'd get more for him, more than just a late round pick, but they get peanuts for him, and Detroit gets a pass rusher that can change things. Again, this is a Detroit team that has very few weaknesses, especially when they had, an elite pass rusher, an elite pass rushing unit. That kind of went downhill a little bit when Aiden Hutchinson went down early on in the season. They've been able to survive that, but whenever you can get some help with the pass rush, that's going to help a defense that has been a little bit underwhelming as of late. They played a great game against the Packers, but outside of that, they'd been prone to giving up some big points totals to some of the teams that they had played. Mike Williams, also among those getting traded today. The former Jets receiver who had come over in the offseason after being cut from the Chargers had his issues with Aaron Rodgers. He gets traded to the Pittsburgh Steelers. This is one of those moves that feels like it's probably where he should have gone from the beginning. He was supposed to meet with the Pittsburgh Steelers in the offseason to decide if he was going to go sign with them. The Steelers, who have a very weak receiving core outside of George Pickens, there's not really anybody else that you feel comfortable throwing the ball to. Calvin Austin has had a couple of good weeks these last few weeks. Russell Wilson has really helped explore that offensive explosiveness just a little bit more than Justin Fields was. The running game's been doing better, but adding Mike Williams kind of adds a second George Pickens. You have George Pickens, who is one of the best contested ball receivers in the entire NFL right now. You go out and you get Mike Williams, whose main specialty is that jump ball. Again, kind of contested ball. If you can just throw it up to him, he'll win a lot of those 50-50 balls. Now they have one of those guys on each of the sidelines. That's not something that's going to be easy to defend. Mike Williams not having his best season. He's obviously had his fair share of issues with Aaron Rodgers and the Jets. It hasn't really worked out. He's coming off of a couple of injuries. This is a guy that, you hope can improve from where he's been this season. But among a honestly quiet day, these were some of the bigger moves. Some other housekeeping stuffs to take a look at here. Khalil Herbert traded to the Bengals after Zach Moss goes on IR. Seems like he's going to be out for an extended period of time. They go and they get Khalil Herbert, a guy who lost basically all of his touches on the Bears to Roschon Johnson and DeAndre Swift. He goes out there, a cheap trade, but they need a running back, Cincinnati does, next to Chase Brown, who, while he's done a really good job taking over that starting role from Zach Moss, he's not a guy that you want to be getting 20, 30 carries a game. He's not someone that I think is really built for that. You don't really want a running back to have a career where they're getting 30 carries a game. They're not really built for that kind of longevity anymore. It's not something that's normal. But I think of the 18 moves, we have to go back to some of the early season moves to see which ones are the most effective. And right now, if I had to just take a screenshot from the outside and say which one of these moves is going to have the biggest effect on the season, I'd say it's going to be DeAndre Hopkins. DeAndre Hopkins, in his second game with the Chiefs, came out and really showed why he is DeAndre Hopkins. I know that's something that people were expecting out of him a little bit, but he goes out and dominates. He absolutely tears up the zone coverage, makes a couple of incredible catches, 2 touchdowns in that game, and that passing offense looks incredibly different with a real wide receiver 1 in there, something that they've been missing for a while. He doesn't have that same explosiveness off the snap that he had in his younger days with the Texans and with the Cardinals, but he's still a guy that, you throw him up the ball, he's going to come down with it more often than not, and that's exactly what Patrick Mahomes needed. He did not have that guy before, especially after Rashee Rice went down. This was honestly a more quiet trade deadline than I was expecting. There's a couple guys, or I should say there's one guy that I was really expecting to get moved that did not get moved, that being Azeez Ojulari from the New York Giants, a pass rusher who's having maybe his best season ever, second best in terms of sack totals, and we're only halfway through the season. He's really come on early on this season. That's a guy that I expected to get moved. Maybe the asking price was too high. Maybe the Giants decided that they were going to re-sign him at the end of the season and it wasn't worth trading. But it's an interesting thing to keep an eye on, what happens with Azeez Ojulari in free agency after the season is done, because he's a guy that I for sure thought was going to be on a different team after this deadline. And then the Cowboys. Before we head out, we have to talk about the Cowboys, of course. They were a team that was supposed to make a super big move, right? Jerry Jones came out and he says they need to make a big move at the deadline in his radio spot after Dak Prescott goes down with a hamstring injury. He's on the IR. This is a team that is in trouble, and what do? They go out and they get Jonathan Mingo. Jonathan Mingo from the Panthers. They give up a lot for him. They give up more for him than they did, than the Panthers got for Deontay Johnson. Jonathan Mingo is not that level of receiver. Deontay Johnson is a guy that I think could help elevate things. Jonathan Mingo is a guy that has not proven any ability in the NFL yet. He's a young receiver still on a rookie deal, and the Cowboys desperately need another receiver across from CeeDee Lamb. But if you wanted someone like that, there's a bunch of other options still out there. You could have gone out, you could have gotten a Darius Slayton from the Giants. You could have gone out there and you could have gotten any number of receivers that were out there. Mike Williams was available. Obviously, he went and got traded to the Pittsburgh Steelers, but that wasn't a price that really was that much to give up. KJ Osborne, I think, would be a better fit down there for the Cowboys that you could have gotten instead of him. Maybe you go out and you get Tyler Boyd. These were options that were out there. Adam Thielen was another option on that same team, a guy that I think would have made a bigger difference on the Cowboys. But there is upside with Jonathan Mingo, and maybe the Cowboys really believe in him. I'm not there to stop them if they really think that is the right decision. It's not what I would have done, but Jerry Jones has made a lot of head-scratching decisions in this last year. We'll see if it works out. I'm not saying it won't, but we'll see. But we're going to take a quick break here. After that trade deadline, we have some winners and losers. We're going to start off with our winners and losers coming up next for a wild week in the NFL here on Sports by GSMC Podcast Network.